Chair in the Telecommunications Software and Systems Group at Waterford Institute of Technology in Ireland. And what I want to present today is two projects that we've been working on that are looking at the area of integration of pervasive computing with social computing. So just to start with that, I was at an event recently in Brussels where some of the research challenges for social networks were presented. And they include things like social graph fragmentation. This deals with the issue that more and more of a new game or media type produces its own social network, and there's very little federation or integration between the different social networks that are out there. And solutions are needed then to open up these social networks to allow more federated information sharing and usage. Also, as these social networks continue to evolve, actually discovering communities within those social networks and constructing specific social graphs for those communities is becoming quite a challenge with these large-scale social networks. Also, security by social network analysis is quite a hot topic. For example, the 9/11 terrorist network was analysed using public information integrated with social network data. And for example, TSSG is doing work in that area where we work with the Irish Criminal Assets Bureau and integrate with that with social network information to track actually criminals and their networks, to identify if two guys are on a plane to Spain and they talk about it on Facebook, chances are they're up to no good. Obviously, there's social and ethical issues related to that, such as privacy, as we've said, trust, identity management are critical social and ethical issues, and that would include child protection, of course. Searching social media is becoming more difficult, and this refers to searching blogs, tweets, and different media on social network sites. The main problem is here that posts are often very frequent and very small, and it's very difficult to find the information that the user is actually looking for. Also, expert finding, the whole phenomenon of crowdsourcing is something that needs more investigation. We need to be able to leverage all the human intelligence that's out there to solve issues that people have that can't be solved just by pointing them at a computer somewhere. And also pervasive content sharing. As we've already heard, the users are becoming more and more prosumers. Everyone's creating content, everyone is sharing content. Users of multiple pervasive devices. Each of these devices can have multitudes of data that users want to distribute in real time. Okay, some more. So personalization for social interaction. So in order to increase levels of social interaction and inclusion, we need personalization engines that locate peers with common interests, common likes and dislikes, or particular trends. These need to be developed. Trend prediction is also critical. So there's research into the dynamics and trends that are emerging within social networks. And these would provide tools then for information extraction, which can be used then for more efficient and relevant content delivery and content management. For example, if you look at Google flu, Google seems to be able to predict now when a flu epidemic is going to break out just by looking at the search terms people in a particular region have put in. Research and information diffusion mechanisms is critical in the era of massive scale social networks. As communication platforms, we need to know how to send information to relevant social groups rather than just spamming the masses. Obviously, the use of social networks for business and marketing. We need to know better how to target social network usage for external communications and internal communications, for customer support and for targeted marketing and advertising. For social gaming and for TV, we need research on mass feedback mechanisms for gaming and television, live online. And immersive social networks are future web platforms that will enhance social interaction, communication, and infotainment. And this immersion should provide more intuitive environments for users and enhanced user experience so that people can actually interact together on the web in a more natural way. So two of the projects I want to present to you very briefly go some way towards addressing these issues. The first is the Persist Project. So Persist was a strep from the first call of FP7, coordinated by me in TSSG. A €5 million budget and 10 partners, and it just finished last October. All our deliverables and papers, open source software and everything is available on our website. What Persist was addressing was the fact that, well, at the time we wrote the proposal, we noticed what we called these islands of pervasiveness, which could be an isolated smart space like your smart car, your smart home, your smart office, but all working in isolation. So the user experience in terms of those isolated smart space was all or nothing. You either get the full experience in the smart space. If you're outside the smart space, you get nothing. Within Persist, we created the concept of personal smart spaces, which are user-centric. They have a very minimal set of functionality, and then they extend when they're merged with other smart spaces. So the person and all their devices would form their own smart space. That then would integrate with, for example, this meeting room, or with their home, and with other smart spaces, and allow more interaction there. Some of the innovations in that project that are relevant, I guess, for this discussion, we've advanced context and preferences lookup. By context information, just to make it clear, context isn't just location information. Context can be any sort of information you would read from a sensor network. It could be the time of day, it could be your heartbeat, it could be your location, it could be the weather, anything else. Using this context information and users' preferences, then we can provide personalized service creation, enriched personal communications. We can predict with a reasonable level of accuracy user intent, and then provide proactive behavior in the services that we provide to the users in their smart space. And we also have learning and reasoning about users, so tracking a user's day-to-day behavior on the web, learning about them, and then inferring actions on their behalf. This also allows then recommender-style service discovery and composition. So similar to the way Amazon might recommend books, we can recommend services to you. There was a lot of work in there on dependability, privacy and trust, federation of information, and grouping and sharing of context information and conflict resolution. So while Persist focused very much on the individual user and that individual's user with interaction with smart spaces, it didn't really go far enough. So we came up with the concept of the Societies Project. Society stands for Self-Orchestrating Community Ambient Intelligent Spaces. It's a project that started last October, the day after Persist finished. Funnily enough, it has a €15.5 million budget. It's coordinated by me again, and it's going to run for 42 months and has 16 partners, and you can find our website there. So the key to societies is the notion of where pervasive computing meets social computing. And we pulled together the consortium you can see there with a vision of developing a complete integrated solution via pervasive communities and cooperating smart spaces, which will extend pervasive systems beyond the individual into dynamic communities of users. And then this research is going to embrace online community services such as social networking and offer new and powerful ways of working, communicating, and socializing. So there's 4 key objectives within the Societies Project. The first is to facilitate the creation, organization, management, and communication of what we call pervasive communities via our concept, the cooperating smart space, where pervasive computing is integrated with social computing. Then we want to provide enhanced user experience both for individuals and for entire user communities based on proactive smart space behavior and dynamic sharing of community resources across geographic boundaries. Obviously, we need to design this in a robust, open and scalable way. It will be an open source system for self-orchestrating pervasive communities. I should give an example, I guess. If everybody walked into this room and they registered with our system, it would form a dynamic community of users and allow you to share your resources, your services, data, and so on. Based on your own personal preferences and based on your own privacy requirements and identity requirements. Importantly, I guess, for this meeting is we're going to evaluate the complete project with end users. We have end users involved from the very start of the project, 3 user groups, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And what we want to do there is look at the acceptance of the technology and the usefulness of the technology by these end user groups. So for example, we're using techniques like, there's actually some techniques from consumer behavior research looking at things like technology readiness indexes to measure how ready people are to adopt a technology. And there's another model, the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology, which tries to determine if people are actually going to adopt the stuff that all us techies think is really great. So the whole concept around societies is about finding users, connecting users, and organizing users together and deploying pervasive services for them. So in terms of the state of the art, pervasive computing deals with the rapid diffusion of technology into all aspects of our lives in a transparent manner for the user. This requires then research into interoperability, mobility, user interfaces, as well as obviously architecture and scalability issues and so on. This research often neglects the cost and of deploying, it neglects the cost and it focuses on deploying of sensor networks and infrastructure with little thought about what the actual user wants. We did address that to a certain extent in the Persist project. In terms of social computing, where we're going beyond state of the art is that we're going to start using social networks as context sources, so sources of context information. We can use the information extracted from social networks to self-organize different communities and sub-communities, and for example, to recommend new members to communities. We're going to explore how to compose services across social networks and community smart spaces within modern web runtime environments. We will build collaboration and productivity tools by combining social network and community smart space applications. For example, Facebook widgets could be deployed in a community smart space. And we will link community smart space services to social network services. In terms of context awareness, as I've mentioned already, a lot of projects have developed, context awareness is quite a buzzword out there. And Persist and a lot of other projects have developed mechanisms to handle group context data. So that's to generate contextual data as a representative of a group of entities. They could be people or things. And this would include development of negotiation schemes and mechanisms for resolving context conflicts. Other relevant research would include using beta mining and what we call Bayesian network inferencing techniques, which is really a technology that's used to model contextual data that might contain uncertainties. And then that allows us to make intelligent assumptions regarding that context information. So societies will go beyond the state of the art in terms of context awareness by modeling context data for a community of users rather than an individual. And that will include their social relationships, their bonds, and their interactions between users. It'll also incorporate metadata about context, such as the quality of context information. As I've said, it'll use social networks as context sources. So some of the key innovations that we're aiming for in societies, we have resource sharing within dynamic communities. So if you form a dynamic community of users, how do you share resource access within those communities, and how do you prioritize various users? How to discover relationships and behavior within the different communities. Orchestration of multiple communities. You can have super communities, sub-communities, different hierarchies of communities being formed dynamically. Proactive exchange of information between members of the community, intelligent information usage, and intelligent conflict resolution within the community. As I said, we have 3 user groups within societies. We try to get a reasonable representation, or a diverse set of users, I suppose you would call it. We have a group of students in Heriot-Watt University in Scotland and in the National Technical University of Athens. We have an enterprise group, so an office-based group based in Intel in Ireland. And I guess the most interesting and challenging one is the Commission's AMC group. So the AMC group is the Commission's disaster management group. They meet 3 or 4 times a year in Cyprus, and they simulate earthquake-type scenarios and disaster scenarios. So they've agreed to allow us to deploy our software with them to see can we help save lives by dynamically forming communities of rescue workers, for example. What we're also going to do is to try and bring in what they term the armchair community, or the couch potato community. So if I could give you an example, if there was an explosion in the middle of Cyprus, You could have somebody sitting here in Oxford who's an expert on that particular region. They could be dynamically brought into the communication loop with this community based on trust, of course. And they could look at maps of the region and they could tell the rescue workers, well, you know, there used to be a bridge there, there used to be a house there, and things like that. Similarly, we might go a bit further in trying to allow people from their home to manually fly remote aircraft to take photographs of specific regions. One of the partner wants to get us to use the PlayStation to do that, but I'm not convinced that's going to work yet. So yeah, we have a very diverse set of users. We've had them involved in the project from the very start. First of all, we've presented them with a number of scenarios to explain what societies could do for them and to get their feedback on what they think of it in terms of the technology and in terms of their privacy requirements. And based on that, we're going to refine our architecture and develop a set of services to go to 2 sets of live trials with each of the 3 user groups, and they'll be happening in about 12 months' time. So what next? Well, we're going to continue with our research both in societies and I guess in the next calls coming out in FP7 and on other places. Again, looking more in depth at merging pervasive computing with social networks, looking at federation of data across multiple social networks, looking at privacy protection, dynamic social network formation, dynamic group formation, and social networks as an enabling technology, for example, for single sign-on, for user profile provision, for service announcements and broadcasts across social networks, for real-world event dissemination, again using social networks as context sources and getting social networks to react to context changes. And that's me.
Fascinating project, and I would spend a lot of time talking about the technology bits, which would be terrific, but not now. So the question I had was, these user trials, all of our projects have these user trials, and it always seems to me to be slightly problematic because they're not really what we want to do. What we really want to do is launch this stuff into business, try them out in the real world, and have them being used by not friendly, tame groups, but actually, and I wonder, how confident are you that the user trials really are going to not just tell you things you need to know about how to tweak your technology, but actually really dig into some of the underlying values and really guide the future research and maybe help you to make some money out of this kind of service in the future.
Yeah, well, we're quite confident. I mean, we've already run a set of what we call paper trials with each of the 3 user groups, and this is essentially presenting storyboards to them without the technology being there. And we have learned quite a lot about what they want, although depending on which user group you speak to, they give kind of conflicting views. For example, the students group from Scotland said they want to stay connected with their friends all the time, and they don't really care about privacy. That's what they said to us. Whereas the students in Greece only want very close communities, and privacy is kind of a number 1 requirement. So they're very conflicting views on how we should be treating the technology towards them. Also, I guess the issue is that societies is creating an enabling platform for third-party services to be developed, okay? So, like a lot of these pervasive computing projects, when you go to do a user trial, they don't really see or understand what's going on under the hood. All they're going to see is whatever's on their device, which is just some example third-party services that are created for them. So if those services aren't good enough, it's going to be very hard to get a view on what they want from the underlying technology. I guess that's what you're getting at as well. But that's why we've got 2 sets of trials. So in 12 months' time, we will deploy software with each of these user groups, more basic sets of functionality to see what they like and what they don't like, and we will change our platform based on that if we can get some of the core requirements changed. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. We have ourselves a number of projects working on social networking and the use of social networking, but what we're seeing is that the space is moving much more quickly than the projects themselves, and I just wondered how much impact you thought this project would have by the time it finishes, considering the state of the nation today.
Funny you should ask that, because we had a 6-month review with the Commission and they asked us the very same question. And to be honest, every time I read Mashup or any of these things online, I see a new community type project coming out, such as Sonar, for example, which looks very close to what we're actually doing in societies. So we're trying our best to stay ahead. I think that the thing that gives us the edge is the more dynamic side of the project and the more pervasive communication side of the project rather than the social network side on its own. If you take a project like Sonar, what they're claiming they can do is that you could arrive into a bar and Sonar will tell you the person across the bar from you knows somebody that you know, for example. But that's based on people dynamically, or sorry, not dynamically, having to physically check in on their phone. It doesn't know, when they've left the room. It's all based on dynamic click-in as they arrive in a particular location. So it's quite static information. I think where we have the edge is the pervasive side and the more dynamic aspects of what we're trying to do. But you're right. I mean, the market is going very quickly, and it's something that we have to keep track of. It's difficult.
Thank you. I wonder if you could very quickly give an example of what sort of contacts you actually get from social networks. And following on from that, is the implication that the value of the platform will be proportionate to people's use of social networks, and therefore there's a risk of creating a whole new layer of exclusion from people who don't actually get involved in online social networks very much?
Yeah, okay. So social networks are only going to be one context source. Okay, you don't have to be a member of a social network for this to work. You could be a student arriving in university, and you could sign up to be part of a community within that university. You don't have to be on a social network. If you're in the social network, we can mine out people's basically whatever public information that they put there. Their likes, their friends, their dislikes, their hobbies, whatever it could be, and then we can try and form communities based on that type of information. Yeah, I mean, the issue of I guess, social exclusion is something that we do need to look at. I'm not 100% sure how we're going to actually address that, but it is certainly something that's in our thoughts at the moment.
Okay, thanks very much, Kevin.
Okay.
Is it very quick?
Well, yes.
Okay.
No, because we hear about checking the difference between Greek and Irish and all that, but I didn't hear the consideration of the difference that may be between women and men, for example, in terms of behavior. And I think that why not consider that one also?
I mean, we've that was just one example I gave. So we have a complete deliverable where we have a full analysis done on all the user groups. That deliverable will be made public in November. But absolutely, different demographics, male, female, everything else is going to be taken into consideration. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.